Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, Editor-in-Chief at R&R, and today we're diving into all things content restoration, specifically antiques and family keepsakes. I'm excited to be joined by Stefan Figley, the president of 1-800 Packouts, a leader in the contents and personal property restoration franchise industry since 2016, and part of a five-star franchising platform of home service brands. Stefan, has nearly 30 years of experience in the franchise and marketing industries with a focus on brand growth. His experience is in areas such as marketing, operations, and business development, and he has enabled companies to achieve their goals and increase their revenue. Stefan holds a Bachelor of Science degree in marketing from Texas Christian University, and he continues to excel in his career as a successful consultant and executive. Please welcome Stefan Figley.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I am so excited to dive into this topic today. I think it's one of those topics that we all know is a necessity, but there's a couple of layers to content, and one of which I kind of wanted to start with, it goes beyond, restoring people's property in times of crisis. So what can you tell us about that side of contents restoration as far as heirlooms, artifacts, and keepsakes?
Yeah, so I mean, as you go through the restoration world, you always find this in when there's a natural disaster or a water break or a fire. That's where it all comes out of the woodwork, right? It's there. But at the same time, folks are finding this either through heirlooms that they get passed down, they've been in their family. They sometimes it means a lot to them. Sometimes they know it should mean something. They may not know. But for those that are trying to restore it and so forth, for those of us that are treating it or wanting to help them restore it or finding the right people, it's about being empathetic to it. This is something that's got a lot of history to it, and it might have a story that they know, and it might not. And sometimes even by restoring it because it hasn't been kept as well, you might find some new things that are there. We've seen that in a couple of items. We had an antique key that we were cleaning one time, and I mean, it popped up and it was like it had all sorts of hieroglyphics on it from a long time ago. We didn't know what they were, but man, once it was cleaned and it was there, we had to give it back to the owner, and we didn't get the final answer of what it was, but they were shocked. They said this has been in our family for 100 years or something, and then they passed it on. They went to go find out what it was. So something that, may open up another part of history for themselves. And we see that a lot, not just in areas, the whole area of antiques and so forth are one item of it. But for us in our business, we have to be empathetic to it. And so we find that that's a very good faction. We want to make sure if they're bringing something, is this a keepsake? Is it something that they are trying to refurbish, or we're trying to get an understanding of what it is to make sure that we handle it correctly and treat it the right way. So yeah, it's great because this is our history. These are what we see and what we know. It tells stories that we may know and we may not know. It may open up other areas that we can go find. So it's always fun to get different types of pieces and then figuring out the right way to make sure it's handled right for the people that are bringing it,
I was
even
gonna
outside
say,
of the restoration aspect.
yeah, I was gonna say, it's something as simple as a key, right? It seems simplistic, and you're like, oh, it's a key, or you may have like some idea of where it comes from, specifically for the family. But then when you really get down to it and you see the detail and, like you said, hieroglyphics on it, you give it back to the family, and then they're like, well, where did this really come from? Like, how does this tie to our family? And they can open up, like you said, a new chapter of where they come from, and it brings meaning. And it also sometimes it can bring you closer to your family that was here before you, right? And I think that, like you said, there's sympathy, there's empathy, and I think that one way, shape, or form in our life, we need contents restoration. Whether we actually pursue it or not, we do need it. And so, speaking of the story side, can you share like another story that happens to just kind of stick with you, that maybe it just pulled at your heartstrings or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's several that are out there that I think of, and there are a lot of folks that are in our industry that they see this a lot, and they probably have even more stories, and that's we all in the industry like that. That's fun. We talk about it, even if we're competitors on different things. It's fun to hear about it because we see different things. But I mean, we've gone from China, like different China that people bring in that have been set in a box. That it's in a box, it's protected. Is it? I mean, we usually, if we're getting it, there's something that's happened. They're not just cleaning it and polishing it. Mold has set in or something like that. And well, my husband wanted me to throw this away was one of them, and it was a box. We had two boxes of China, and I don't think she knew even where it had come from, like the history all in all. She knew it was from her grandmother or something like that. I don't think her mother had even opened it, and I mean it was in a box that
Wow.
was not recent, and they had had some. They did have some damage, and the mold had gotten on the box, and it was getting on the stuff that the older paper, and it wasn't newspaper. That would have given us an idea of when it was last wrapped, even. But
Right.
we didn't get that, so we were trying to, and we don't go and try to figure out what it is. What is, well, this came from my family, so we started to clean it, and it was great. And she's like, I don't know. And she had found a photo when she came back to pick it up that matched from black and white, had the pattern of the china on it from her grandmother, and it looked like it had been passed down in the family for multiple generations. So I think I don't want to be her husband that told her to throw it away because she had now found a photo. Once we cleaned it up and everything, easily could see the pattern that was on it, and it matched to some photos. So uh, he might have been in the doghouse for a little bit on that one,
I was gonna
probably.
say, can
So,
you imagine that conversation when she came back
yeah,
and she's
married
like,
life. Never say that until you know it's not worth anything. No, yeah, I mean, you get a lot of little stories like this, and you get to small, big, go down to jewelry is a big heirloom item that's you see a lot of. Sometimes you and I were talking about a little bit ahead of time. Sometimes it's treated as, oh my gosh, here it is. I haven't taken it out of this. Um, is it okay? We want to make sure it's restored. It's really good. Whereas other people are wearing it and it's being tossed around. You want to clean it right. You want to make sure. Now, jewelry stores can clean it. We use ultrasonic tanks, so do jewelry stores. Um, you want to get sure you're getting in there. You want to be cautious with the stone that's in it, if it is a diamond or a ruby or an emerald or any type of stone. When you use such quality of an ultrasonic, it's going to vibrate. So you want to be very cautious with it.
yeah,
And you always make sure that the folks know that there is a possibility it might jar loose. We can get it replaced. We're not going to lose it. We're putting it in a special basket so that it's not going to go anywhere, et cetera. You want to make sure they're being taken care of, that they are confident that it's being cared for, because it obviously is something they're asking about. So they have a care for it of some degree. Is another one. One of the some of the stuff that really that resonate with me a lot back in it. We see a lot across the industry, and I know we do in our franchise owners. They see it from military awards, medals. Um, a lot of times we see them after a fire. They had them there. They were a father or a grandfather or a brother's Purple Heart, an Iron Cross, a Naval Cross, all different elements that come in. Are they damaged? Not permanently. We want to make sure they're taken care of. Well, they have two elements, right? They have the actual metal and physical portion of it, as well as the ribbon that goes with it. And so you need to be able to handle both elements, because that has a deep sentiment to most of the folks that are dealing with that. And that's important to not just even them, it's important to the history of that person. Even if they've passed on, their history has really helped us get to where we are. So I'm proud of my owners, and when they take care of it, I know everybody in our industry, when they get any type of item like that, it's extremely sentimental to the owner of it, but also to those that are taking care of it, and it means a lot. So those are just some of the little areas. Different areas of the country, you'll get guns that are passed down, old hunting rifles, and they want them cleaned and get them back to almost reality. A lot of times, those are a skip generation that I
hmm
think that I see, and that's why they're rusted, they're a little damaged. That's even personally my wife's. father's guns as he passed away were skipped a generation and handed to and provided as a heirloom to our son. They're not usable, they're old. But we had them cleaned, made sure they were done and restored properly. Once you've cleaned them, you can know that's also where you can tell if there's some things that need to be professionally restored. And so you have to be a little cautious as you're cleaning them. And of course, the restorer is going to be cautious to do it as original as possible so that it doesn't have any differences. So it's a very unique element to it when you deal with antiques, heirlooms, anything that has some type of age as well as real true meaning. Value is the eye of the beholder in this situation. It's not the dollar value. Of course, many may have a dollar, significant dollar value to it, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, there's some things you look at might be worth $10, but man, the feeling and the thing that it comes with is way more valuable than that. And so
I was
we
gonna say
always try
ultimately priceless, right? Like it could
for
ultimately
a
be
lot of it,
priceless.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. For them, it might be. Absolutely.
And I think you touched on a good point, content, when people think of contents, it actually spans across so many different things, jewelry, artifacts, guns, I mean, metals. And then, let's think about the businesses that we walk into or that we serve. I mean, you have churches, you have temples, you have universities. And so you can get into that, cultural and, religious artifacts at that point. And is there a different way to handle those? What, like you said, there's sympathy, empathy, and there's like a connection, right? At the end of the day, you're able to hand this back to whoever gave it to you and just seeing their face, you handled it with such great care, but what type of responsibility comes with handling um, pieces like that?
Yeah, I mean, even from an heirloom, as a restorer being in the industry of restoration, you want to make sure you can do the job. Know when you can't. That's extremely important. This spans just making money and doing a business, and that is extremely important in this. Before I get even to some of those types of elements, you have art, fine art. There are folks that specialize in fine art, and knowing when you're out of your depth and making sure you find that specialist to help you is the right thing to do. And so that happens in art. And I'll give you a personal story on it. My family actually collected antique maps, and there was a lot of restoration as I was growing up and how to handle items from the 1300s and 1200s in when they were damaged and how to repair them. My father was an expert in it, and there were times when he didn't bother doing the repair. He took it to a very specific person and group that could do that type of work. If it's done wrong, it damages it. It can, if it is a thing on value, it would damage the value to it. It's an heirloom. It changes the perception of that heirloom. One you brought up, religious artifacts, for example. In my world, I would tell every owner that I know, identify if you are going in and you're working on a church, for example, work with the folks there to understand what is what. Because if it is something that is maybe they have a passed down a Bible or anything of that type of element, you want to know if it's been passed down by multiple generations, four, five, maybe even more. You might not be the right person to even take the first crack at it. And let's get in touch with the right people to do it. Because, like you said, you want to be able to hand that back. Again, our job in our business is to be empathetic, and we deal with people's personal belongings or valuable elements for something, whether it's a religious fact, a church. It could be a business that has elements that are in it. We've dealt with a large commercial group that had property, and they had art and antiques on property, and they had a fire and soot was ever over everything. There were certain elements that I know our owners didn't bother touching. They were like, this is too valuable for what we do. We don't want to put in here. We're going to go through and have a personal touch get the right person to come in and deal with that. And so, again, knowing where you are, this isn't a just do it type, "Ah, let's get it done and get it back." You're entering into an area that you have to take some time. So
I was just
part
going
of
to
it
say
is,
the emotional, right? Like the
yeah,
emotional aspect is, I didn't mean to cut
absolutely.
you off there, but it's like
No, you're
it's
right.
at the end of the day, it's so emotional for most of these people, if not all of them. Granted, I'm sure that there are also people that come to just get things restored just because it's time. So there
Sure.
is still emotion, but I would definitely say, like you're just talking about the fire with the soot and all of that, there's a time and a place as a professional to say we can handle this, but we need to have somebody else that specializes in this to handle it. Because, like I said, we're seeing most people on the worst times of during the worst times of
Sure.
their life, you know. And I think it's extremely important to understand there's different approaches for different things, right? It's not a one size fits all, as most of the stuff we do in this industry is. It's no different here, right?
Yeah, but you're correct. I mean, we all in this industry will see things that are not absolutely from some disaster per se, but what we end up seeing a lot of is they're saying, well, it's time, it's dirty, it's not as a lot of times it's not a disaster, but it fits into a lot of elements that we actually deal with, such as mold. Mold's a big one that ends up on a lot of artifacts or on antiques that aren't managed or cared for on a regular basis. They're passed down, they're lost, they're forgotten about in the closet or in the basement, depending on where you live.
I was gonna say where you live, huh?
So we might be dealing with mold, which we deal with in a catastrophe or a sort of, more of a disaster situation, but it can come to us in all of us in different elements, and you're still dealing with it as that prized possession of the folks that are bringing it and wanting to handle it correctly.
I was definitely going to say you just kind of touched on this, and I think it's extremely important to understand that the role we play is extremely crucial because we can actually determine how things are passed down for future generations, right? So we know that antiques serve a very sentimental purpose, but they also serve a historic purpose, right? So there's things that we see passed down from generation to generation that maybe not be your jewelry or a gun, but it could be a specific relic to somebody, right?
Yeah.
And, how do we preserve those as professionals? Not necessarily technical, but maybe it's, if you have a customer or you're thinking about doing content as a regular service, what are the ways to make sure that we're preserving the items we're touching for future generations?
Yeah, I mean that goes to training. Again, for anybody in our industry, handle it correctly. Know that you're dealing with this. Know when you're out of your depth is the other one. Just and I said it before, but you have to be able to say, I can't do this, or this should or should not. Ask for assistance. Should this go? Is this an element that can go into ultrasonic, or is it the type of element that might be damaged based on such a high level of sonic waves that are going to help clean it? Yeah, it might be the fastest way to do it, but is that the best thing for that item? And so for all of us in the industry, I think it is, and then I say most of us always do take the time to understand, can we do this way or finding the right way? So not everything is a one-stop solution and the same solution. And it's identifying the right one, finding the right solution that goes with it. It isn't just drop it into a cleaning solution and there it goes. What is it made of? Is it porcelain? Is it this? Can we do this? What is it? How, if it's that old, how is it painted? It might have a different type of paint. You want to be very cautious with it. And so I think, from my experience in our industry, I see folks take their time to understand it and they are very cautious with this. No one's in this industry very long if you're not doing that. So kudos to all of us that are in that, but it is extremely important to us because, like you said it, you get to bring this back to somebody. You're bringing life back to somebody. Just like after a disaster, maybe they haven't had it. You get to bring their personal belongings back to them, that they have some, uh, you know, comfort of back to normal, if you would. And that's important. That's really a nice thing about what we do in this industry.
And I was definitely going to say, just to feed off of that too, sometimes this is the last thing that somebody has left of somebody, right? Especially when we get into like military or jewelry, or even China. Those are sometimes things that you often inherit. And that was
Yeah.
like the last gift that was given to you by your grandmother, your spouse, whoever. And I think, it just it's one of those things that it's like it may have not meant anything to you before, right? You saw it around and it was like, oh, that's really cool or that's pretty or whatever. And then when it becomes yours, it's like your baby, right? You're like, please take care of it and bring it back to me.
Yeah.
I think there's another aspect to this as well. Like we touch historical things in our time and we can see how things are linked to specific timelines. And I think, like you said, you have to identify, is it porcelain? What paint is it paint? I know there's a lot of things in the past that were made with clay. How
That's
do
right.
you handle clay? And I know oftentimes in the past we relied on food dye essentially, right? You use beets or and
Yeah.
how do you handle that? How do you determine that? I guess is a good place to start. How do you determine what something is, composed of?
Yeah, and that becomes very difficult. A lot of times, the folks bringing it in, the individual bringing it in, if it's not from a disaster or a loss or an insurance type claim that there's water or fire or anything, if they're bringing it in to try and get it restored, do they have some knowledge of it, or they can give you some history? It's not usually they found it and they have absolutely no knowledge. So from a majority time frame, I think you're getting at least a little bit of history, and you can make a determination of about what it is. And if you really don't know, you want to make a phone call. You want to get somebody else involved. Again, know when you're out of your depth. There's a reason you're being asked to look at this or try to restore it or clean it or do something. So make sure you understand, ask the right questions to the folks bringing it in, understand the value, what it meant a little bit. Again, we're used to doing that in this industry because of what we deal with on the larger storms and the disasters that happen to people. We know we want to talk to them. We know this is a very difficult situation. So a lot of folks in this industry are used to asking a few questions to make sure they have a good understanding of what it is. And from there, you can make your decision of where it is. Know if you don't have the right equipment. There are folks that have the right equipment to dry and clean paper products, for example, which you're going to want to do around, for example, in my family, old maps. So you can clean them. You got to be very careful with it. There's a process to it. Books, if they were in water, you can deal with that and still get them to survive. So not everybody has that equipment. And knowing that people are out there that do, you can provide that option as a way to preserve the item that they're bringing in. So again, how to do it, unless you're an art expert and you have that type of history, I
Yeah.
don't think there's very many of us in this industry that can do that on the call on the fly. But we do all have resources that we tap into to make sure that we're identifying it right. And um, if somebody's saying this has been in my family for 100 years, you're going to probably want to make a call before you're putting that into something that's a modern, just to double check. And so making sure you're doing it the right way is extremely crucial.
I was also going to say, like you said, the resources, right? Collaboration is so huge in our industry. And I had this conversation just the other day. It's okay to say no and to know when to say no. You don't necessarily like say no, but you know when to pass it off to somebody who will handle it the way it's supposed to be handled. Um, I think oftentimes in society, no is a bad word, essentially, but in our industry, when we're handling somebody's sentimental items or historical artifacts, whatever the case may be, you can't respawn it, I guess is the nicest thing to
Oh,
say. And so
absolutely.
in order to help these people in the times that they need help, you just have to outsource, and that's okay. Because you have your specialty and people are going to rely on you for your specialty. I know we talked about, how to handle them, the importance of restoring and reviving, but there's also an important piece to this, which is, keeping up with these pieces and how to effectively take care of them and be able to allow them to be passed from generation to generation. And where does content come into that, as far as its livelihood?
That's a little bit difficult in the aspect, but I think there's some of us that have like how to maintain and package and clean and um, I've been around items that are old. You don't put chemicals on them. You use a light duster to make sure you keep dust off of it. You keep it out of direct sunlight. There's a lot of things like that that we can guide. Um, to depending on what type of item it is. Many folks in the industry know that certain elements, whether it's literally earth, wind, fire, sun, are going to potentially damage certain things, even just being near them or in contact with it. And we know that, and as we try to deal with cleaning it or restoring different items in our histories and our experiences, and so therefore we can assist with that and give recommendations. I don't think we have, I mean, unless you're a specialist in it, you would give specific instructions. But as you get deeper and deeper into heirlooms, you're going to be how to maintain it. You're going to find somebody that's an absolute specialist in it, whether it's china or metal, based on if it's how antique it is, et cetera. But that's where you continue the collaboration within the industry. We had one actually not too long ago, and it wasn't from a disaster. They had antique dolls. And we had an owner who did not have the experience to deal with it. And we actually talked to a competitor of ours in the marketplace, but we said, this is probably, they actually did have expertise to handle and the equipment to handle what was actually needing to be done. So they had found their I believe it was the grandmother's or great grandmother's antique doll collection. And of course, our owner really wanted to do it to help them. And our
Yeah.
recommendation was, you know what, let's talk. Well, the person they do have this, that's a direct competitor of ours. Is like I know we had the coach tell them like, look, it's better to do that. So we're trying to make sure we help this customer and this individual. This is something that's quite precious to them.
Yeah.
And so we just have to do that sometimes. It's not just about our bottom line or a dollar of business. You're also taking care of somebody's prize. In this situation, probably somewhat of a prized possession. Um, Definitely an heirloom that you didn't want to mess up. You can't respawn it. You can't bring it back. Period. And so making sure that you're getting it to someone that could help them is also part of our job in this industry.
I was also going to say when you end up, outsourcing, even if it's to a competitor, you also build a collaboration in the act of that. You also may get a referral from them. There may be something that they can't handle. And then when it comes back to the customer, you're going to leave a lasting impression. And the last thing you want to do is traumatize them or cause them to be upset. You want to leave a positive, lasting impression, even if you told them, hey, we can't handle it specifically, but we know somebody who can. That makes the world of a difference to, our consumers. And just really, if you think about it, there's a stigma in every industry, and it's scary, right? It's scary to hand something off that means so much to you. And especially if you stumbled upon it and you're like, oh, I never knew this existed, or this is the last thing I have. And then you kind of just say, okay, here, take it. And you hope for the best, and you prepare for the worst, and that's in every case. And I think that this just shows how important collaboration is, for all levels of our industry. And I mean, it's painful, don't get me wrong. It's like, oh, I wish we could have helped them, right? In that, like, ego, like, we wanted to do this, we it's just something you want to do. But then at the end of the day, you're like, the right thing to do is to hand it off. And that's okay. It's okay to hand it off. And I think, I would imagine when they got it back, it was probably better than anyone could have ever imagined, right?
Yeah. And I mean, our industry as a whole, I mean, I don't think anybody's after anybody in that sense, if you would. I mean, there's a lot of business out here. We all have enough. We all can go after our business and get it. And I know specifically in our contents world, it's not a dog eat dog world in that sense. We converse and we talk strategy and business overall with our direct competitors. And I'm in a niche part of the restoration world. We talk to them specifically on how to handle different situations, and that's a nice thing to have in the industry. We're not out at each other's throats all the time on this. That isn't the case, and a lot of times you want to build that relationship in your market with even with a competitor, because you guys are all going to be facing the same type of elements when we get to that disaster or that situation. Yeah, sure. We might say, hey, we really need to go over here to this gentleman. I think they have a better opportunity to do it. But when you have this, we're better at this than them. You always can throw that in there at the end, just making sure you take care of this. I'm just kidding. But it's again, you always have to have a little jab in there. But no,
Yeah.
I think overall, the thing, I've been in the industry for a little while, approaching a decade of it, and I don't see anybody that I think they're they would ever sit there and say they wouldn't steer a customer in the right direction. I really have not seen that in our industry, and that's great. And that's why we handle and we have that empathy, because we do deal with a lot of situations that are not just a transactional aspect. So
Yeah, and I would definitely say I feel like the evolution and advancement in our industry involves collaboration with your direct competitor or maybe somebody that you have never heard of, but they can take us to that next level. And I think that's the important thing here is at the end of the day, there is enough business to go around. We all have the same objective and goal, and that's to help people on the best and worst times in their life. And, it's just one of those things when we look at contents, there's so many levels, right? There's ways to advance, but there's also ways to maybe there's things that you collaborate on, how do you handle this type of situation, emotionally, right? You guys see some catastrophic events. I mean, not just, fires and water damage and mold. I mean, you could have crime scene, right? There's contents for crime scene or um biohazard, right? There's
absolutely.
layers to this, and I think that it's extremely important to understand that at the end of the day, collaboration is important. Everybody has their specialty, and
Yep,
that's how we make this thing go around.
that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
I think it's nice that you brought up the competition thing. I really do, because it's a friendly competition, I would say. Everybody wants to succeed, but our goal remains the same. Um, Back on content, what I'm interested, what made you come into the contents world, the restoration world?
So, I mean, I've been in the restoration world for a while. I worked with a full mitigation franchise system. I left for a little bit and was in the with basically general construction side of it. Not of restoration per se. We did restoration work, but we did other elements. And for me, coming into restoration, there's an element of empathy in restoration. It's That's a great thing. I like to see people happy in a good sense. I don't like to see them in in the other elements. But we're changing people. We're bringing it back to life. We're getting them back to where they need to go. I like that about the franchising world as well. And so it's a business and an industry that's strong. We're consistent for the most part. We have a couple lulls here and there. If you look at the overall industry, who doesn't? We probably have less than other industries in that sense. It's a pretty tight network when you get into it for such a large industry. Um, Even having stepped out for 2 years in the middle of something, I come back and people are there. They might be at a different organization, but they're still involved in it. And it's just nice. It really finds some great folks that run their businesses, intelligent. They solve problems. It's exciting for me, and so I enjoyed coming back to it, and I like being part of the franchise situation. So for me, that was a nice thing back to, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, and I would definitely say, sorry, my earphone died. But I was definitely gonna say, I actually too took a step back from the industry for about 9 months, and then I came back, and it was just like so refreshing to see familiar faces and connect with people, even if they were somewhere else. I really think that we're one big happy family. You have the love all the time, but then you have the like a cousin relationship or a brother sister relationship, and I think it's a really beautiful thing because we're able to serve at the highest capacity possible.
Yeah.
I feel like once you come into this industry and you try and leave, you always come back. There's just, you
It
just
does a lot. I think there's a lot of boomerang effect for some folks. And then you get to some folks that I've been around and like they're asking like, I'm not sure why I'm back. They like I think they retired. I had a couple friends that have retired and all of a sudden 3 years later I see them again at a trade show and I'm like, what are you doing here? And he, I don't know, but I'm back. It's like,
I just feel the
I
same
think for
way.
some, we're used to being busy and working and in that engagement, like you said, we're used to a different element, and sometimes it's hard to step out of that, and but it's great, and that's always a nice thing, and folks are always willing to share, and that's been a great thing that I've seen in the industry overall. So
I definitely can second that for sure. And I would say, if there's any advice you could give to somebody who's thinking about maybe adding content to their business, right? Because there's layers of this industry like we've talked about. Where do they start? Is it by collaboration or maybe just mentorship, or what do you think is the best avenue, for somebody to kind of get their toes wet?
sure. The best avenue, not what I've seen happen, is, yeah, do it right. Do it by if you're doing it from an insurance perspective, make sure you're doing it by what the insurance carriers have as expectations. There's levels of cleaning that they expect, and you see folks the not right way to do it. They're trying to dip their toe into it, and they're not doing it to the standards that a lot of us want to do it. And what potentially a homeowner or a policyholder would expect. We've been talking about antiques, heirlooms. They want it clean. They want their even non-heirlooms. They want their items refreshed, clean, so that they can get back to their life after something usually bad has happened. And so it's our job in the industry to make sure we deliver on that. And so if you're doing it, collaborate, learn what it is, find partners that'll do it, know that you want to go into it, go to do the trainings. A lot of the vendors that of the equipment you want, they offer the training. Make sure you do it. Otherwise, look at a franchise system that has it, such as us, such as some of our competitors, and looking at it as an add-on if you're already in there. And why? Because we have the right business models that are set up to be able to add that on. And that's the right way to do it in the industry, versus just trying to make it up as you go.
Well, and I was definitely going to say too, it's we all need to go back on the basis of standard of care. What if it's insurance, what their policies and expectations are. Training is such a valuable asset and it's priceless at the end of the day, right? It's what makes your business go around, whether you're sitting in an IICRC certification course or you're working directly with the manufacturers or suppliers. If you're getting together with people who are in the industry that just happen to be local, right? Like that's another way to learn,
Absolutely.
gather up all of the restoration businesses in your area and host a training because strength is in numbers, but also there's times in this industry where everybody has to come together and go help. Like with the hurricanes, right? There are
Yes.
so many people with boots on the ground right now. You can't train enough people, to be able to help in those situations. So I think you said that best, honestly, like do it the right way. It's kind of like my husband will say, buy it twice or buy it nice. So it's like, hey, train or there's consequences that come.
There are. Yes. And it goes all the way back to what you were saying. I mean, if you're in the industry and somebody comes to you and you don't do a lot of cleaning, you're not going to be ready to restore something that might be to their level of what they're bringing, like an heirloom or something that they see as more priceless or close to priceless, that has a very big sentimental value to them. You might think it's, oh, let's just do it and you get it done and it may damage it or make it not right. And that's why you want to, I mean, we were talking about something extremely specific that as you want to enter this arena, there is a reason there's a specialties in the industry because there's an element of personal touch to it that has to be there to deliver for them.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. And I think like you said, there's specialties, right? And so like you don't have to do it all. Like you can focus on furniture, right? That can be your specialty. Maybe it's a specific type of fabric. There's
yep,
leather and there's different types of upholstery, just everything. I mean, there's a way to do it correctly. And I think at the end of the day, that's extremely important. Just like there's a way to, dry out properly and things like that. There's all
absolutely.
scenarios that play into this. And I think the reason why content is essential is because it can happen anytime. And it's honestly a necessity. But when we're in our world, we happen to just see that in times of need and or someone stumbles upon something. So I
Yep.
really appreciate you taking the time to talk all things contents in a different light than what we're used to talking about. And just goes to show how you can add something like this to your business in a whole different aspect. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? If so, go for it.
Well, no, I mean, I appreciate everything you guys do and what you do, Kayla. And no, I mean, we're out here to help folks, and we'll train on it, and we like being part of the industry for that. And we're here to help any of our partners and our competitors and folks that are in the industry in any way we can. So no, we're happy to talk. It's great. It's a little bit of a different light and approach to some of it, and sometimes we have to step back and remember there are different areas and different avenues that can come into us. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan, for joining us today. And for all of you listening, we'll see you on the next Ask the Expert. Take care.